you would please join us in our statement of faith. Together, there is only one presence and one power in the universe and in my life, God the good, omnipotent.
Good morning. I guess Mitch thought you wouldn't sit down if I said it. No. So good morning to all of you sitting here in our sanctuary and those who are joining us at home, hopefully live streaming right now. Kat says yes, all right. If anyone is present or viewing for the first time, we welcome you and hope that you will join us again soon. After our service, our ambassador Stella, who is in the back with a gold stole around her neck, will be available with an informational packet and a mug. She'll answer any questions you have about Unity and just properly welcome you, so please check in with her before you leave. The flowers today were provided by Reverends McClellan Small Group, the Reverends McClellan Small Group, in celebration of the recent nuptials of John Brocker and Jeannie Kemper. Yay. If you would, go ahead and check in on Facebook, telling your friends and family that you're here at Unity of Springfield, and then if you would silence or turn off your phone. Please join me in the mission statement. It should be on the screen. Together, our mission is to encourage and inspire spiritual and personal growth by empowering each other to be authentically all that we came here to be. And let us speak together the affirmation for today's daily word. Together, the all-knowing mind of Christ is in me. I think clearly, and I remember what I learn. We limit our own powers by barely using the capacities that are within us. All of us have much more ability than we are expressing. We have much more talent latent than we are using. We have untapped resources of power and wisdom and intelligence within us. How can we release our innate capacity? How can we expand our ability? How can we enhance our mental powers? The first step in freeing ourselves from limited thinking, from half-alive living, is to affirm that we have the all-knowing mind of Christ in us. As we identify ourselves with the Christ mind, we make connection with divine forces within us. We are capable of greatness through the expression of the Christ mind in us. We are capable of clear thinking, of creative living, of quick, helpful, intelligent action. Let us never depreciate our faculties, our powers. Let us keep before us the realization that we have the all-knowing mind of Christ in us. The scripture for today is from 1 Corinthians. Together, we have the mind of Christ. And let us repeat the affirmation together. The all-knowing mind of Christ is in me. I think clearly, and I remember what I learn. As Sue rings the prayer bowl, please hold the following people in your prayerful thoughts for their highest and best. Kelly, Nancy, Marilyn, Helen, Deb, Barbara, Beth, Mark, Chris, Blaine, Julie, Clay, Linda, Terry, Kat, Ricky, Dee, Tamara, Nathan, and anyone else that you would like to pray for. Let us also hold Mary Lou Rao and her family in great love and strength as Mary Lou is on hospice after experiencing a stroke and preparing to make her transition. As the sounds and vibrations from the prayer bowl flow over the sanctuary and out to our friends on live stream, take a deep breath, hold, and release. Recognize the one power and presence in the universe and in our lives, living in us, as us, and through us. Our very life is a gift from Spirit. Let us begin to relax, making it easier to move into prayer and meditation. Focus on the crown of your head, relaxing as you move down to your forehead, eyes, ears, lips, tongue, and jaw. Roll your neck and shoulders to release any tension or stiffness. Follow that relaxation as it moves down your arms, your elbows, wrists, hands, and fingers. Feel and see the relaxation taking place in your body as you move down your spine and into your lower back. Relax your thighs, your knees, calves, ankles, feet, and your toes. Take a deep breath, hold, and exhale. We pray for all that have been placed on the prayer list by their loved ones. We also include ourselves, our families, friends, and neighbors. For all, we affirm bodies immersed in good health, finances to cover not only needs, but also dreams and desires, loving relationships with family and friends, the guidance we seek, peace of mind, and spiritual transformation. We surround not only our spiritual community, but also our city, our state, our nation, all nations, with prayers for fairness and respect for all, happiness, joy, abundance, and inclusivity. We visualize peace among all in our country, in all countries, and across all governments. I invite our congregants here in the sanctuary and those viewing from their homes to realize and accept that each of us is worthy of all the good we desire, and we are loved by God just the way we are. We are so blessed by God's gifts to us of life, love, and connection. With infinite gratitude, we share our loving, accepting, and welcoming energy within this spiritual community to the whole world and everyone in it. The first step in freeing ourselves from limited thinking, from half alive living, is to affirm that we have the all-knowing mind of Christ in each and every one of us. Repeat silently to yourself, I am open and receptive to the all-knowing mind of Christ. Again, I am open and receptive to the all-knowing mind of Christ.
band.
Hey y'all, did you know we have a connection group on Facebook?
Good to see everybody here again. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. And I loved your passion in that song. And then you're singing another song right by the same person, yeah. So thank you for bringing that to us. So how are we all doing today? Good. Yay! Yay! I want to say thank you to Dee Richardson for stepping in last week and sharing about the 4 agreements. I think that we can always be reminded about those 4 agreements. Yes? Yeah, like the don't take anything personally one. How we doing on that? Yeah. Don't make assumptions. Oh, yeah, that's a good one, huh? Always do your best. And what was the last one? Be impeccable with your word. Yes, thank you. I do want to, again acknowledge that Mary Lou Rao is in process of making her transition. And for those of you who don't know Mary Lou and her husband Cecil really have been, icons here in our ministry for decades upon decades and have been very involved in the ministry. And, I got to go see her yesterday and she was conscious and, just sharing in the joy that she's going to get to see her husband soon. And we want to hold in our prayers as well Dee Dee Armand, who is having open heart surgery tomorrow. So we see everything just flowing and going beautifully with that. Yeah. Okay, so we are in week 4 of transforming through the parables. And I'm going to grab my thing here. And I'm just going to say that if you haven't gotten to hear any of the talks yet, please go back and listen to them because I have so much I want to share with you today that I'm not going to do a review on the last few weeks. This is based on 2 books, Irvin Seal's Learn to Live and Jesus' Parables, Finding Our God Within by Robert Winterhalter and George W. Fisk. Now, what these parables help us to do is they help us, as Scripture says, to stir up the gift of God within us, to remind us of the power that is within us, to remind us that, as the beautiful meditation said, we have that Christ mind. And Jesus in his parables is always referring to the kingdom of heaven is like unto. The kingdom of God is like unto. And that kingdom of heaven is the universal truths, the universal laws. It's that remembering of who and what we are and living from that. So what we're moving into right now are the parables of the laws of the mind. And we're going to start with the parable in Matthew 20, 1 through 16. This is the parable of the workers in the vineyard. So I'm going to give you a synopsis of this parable. So Jesus says, for the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire his workers for his vineyard. So he found some people to hire. He told them that he would pay them a denarius for the day of work, and they went out to work in the vineyards. Well, a little bit later, he went out about 9 in the morning, found some people standing around, said, would you like to come and work in my vineyards? They said, yes, I will pay you fairly. Go work in my vineyards. Then it says at noon, at 3, and at 5 o'clock, he went back out, invited people to come work, and he would pay them fairly. At the end of the day, he calls his foreman, and he says, I want you to pay the last ones first and the first ones last. So the last ones come, and he pays them a denarius. So all of the workers who worked, whatever hours they worked that day, got a denarius. Well, the people, as you can imagine, who worked all day out there were like, whoa, hey, hold on here now. This is not fair at all. We've been out there all day, and you're paying us the same as you're paying somebody who's worked only a couple of hours. And so the owner of the land says, I am not being unfair to you, my friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give to the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my money, or are you envious because I am generous? And then it ends by saying, so the last will be first and the first will be last. So here's what we know. What we know is that our experience individually and collectively is the result of our consciousness. Yes, this is what we teach. Okay, it's the result of our consciousness. So these parables are always going to be about how we can use the mind and our consciousness to create the life that we truly desire to live, how we can make a difference in the world as well. So the laborers in the vineyard, and what I'm doing is I'm going to metaphysicalize, that is not a word, but I made it up. These parables, and what that means is simply, metaphysical is simply beyond the literal. These are teaching stories. So we weren't speaking literally here. They're stories that can help us deepen our awareness of who and what we are and our relationship with this that we call God. So he says the laborers in the vineyard illustrate the law of agreement. Whatever the mind agrees with, it will experience. And he goes on to say, nothing is more infallible than this. Whatever any individual human mind beholds, accepts, and agrees with, the creative power will honor that acceptance and agreement with the name of action, function, and expression. Okay, so we understand this, right? Makes sense that this is the law of agreement. Whatever, and put it in easy terms, whatever we think about, we bring about on a regular basis. Recognize we're talking about our consciousness. We're not talking about just thoughts that come and go. We're talking about what we really and truly believe about ourselves, about the nature of life, about whether we're worthy or not, about the nature of God. This is what this comes down to. Robert Winterhalter, in his book, says that this parable relates to the fact that the grace of God, when received into our consciousness, progressively cancels the results of our past negative thoughts and actions. I've shared this before. Grace in Unity is that you never reap the full harvest of your error thinking, and you always reap more good than you sow. Yay! Isn't that great news? You never reap the full harvest of your error thinking, and you always reap more good than you sow, because God is good. God is expansive. God is creativity. And that's really great news, you guys. That's really fantastic news. That means that not every little thought that we think is creating something in our lives. It's the things that we truly believe. It's the vibration, the essence that we're putting out there. That's what matters here. He says that it is the nature of Father, Mother, God to give lavishly of every benefit. Divine grace is not miserly. Ephesians 3:20 reminds us that the power at work within us is able to do far more abundantly than all that we ask or think. Yay! Isn't that great news? It's awesome. We think we do have to do the work. We absolutely have to do the work. But the cool thing is that the power that is within us is able to do far more abundantly, even beyond what we think. How many times in your life have you said, I never imagined it could be this way? Yeah, because it's so far beyond our human imaginings when we open ourselves up to this divine mind, to this that we call the Christ mind that is within each and every one of us. Mr. Seal goes on to say that Jesus's analogies about vines and vineyards point to our own inner life, meaning our consciousness and what we choose to do with it, that we're all workers within the vineyards of our own minds. And we're choosing what we're putting in there, what we're allowing to stay in there. Yes, we actually are, whether you believe it or not. We are all the time. So the question with this particular parable is, what have you made agreement with? What have you made agreement with? So I'm going to give you an example. There's a woman who lived down the street from where Paul has an Airbnb, and one day her adult daughter came home, and as she opened up the front door, somebody was going out the back door. And what they discovered, that this thief that broke in had actually taken $2,000 that this woman had been saving for a while for something. But reading her post, And of course, her initial thing was just so grateful that everything was fine with her daughter, that nothing happened there. But instead of going down the road of how awful this was, awfulizing this person, she made it a point to say that clearly this person, whoever it was, had some deep wound within them that caused them to act out in this way. And she hoped that that money was going to help that person, and that ultimately this person will find healing in their lives. And it's such a rare thing to see that kind of this was her initial reaction. This wasn't like days later. This was like, hey, I don't want any, she didn't say this, but essentially she was saying, I don't want all of us on here awfulizing this, making this a bad thing. And here's the thing, that she made an agreement in her life to say, no one and nothing is against me. No one and nothing is against me. I'm not a victim. That actually God is for me. And that everyone is a child of God, even people who act out in ways that we wouldn't consider to be the highest and best ways. So again, what agreements have you made in your life? And so some of the questions I'm going to ask you is, have you agreed to be financially prosperous or not? Have you agreed to be healthy or not? Have you agreed to have loving relationships or not? And these were all in the meditation this morning, and I just love that so much because we never talked about that. Have you agreed that God is for you? Do you know how different life is when you live with the agreement that God is for me? The universe is for me? What? Does that change things in your life when you live from that perspective? And have you made the agreement that you're worthy and deserving of the good that you desire? And I really want to encourage you to check in on these agreements, because I promise you're going to find that you've made some agreements that are continuously showing up in your lives that aren't necessarily the agreements that you want to have made. Yes? Yeah. So it's just getting clear on these. That's what these parables all are about. Waking us up and saying, look at these things. Now, guess what you can do? You can change the agreement. Isn't that great? Yeah. Okay, I'm bringing coffee in for sure. This is like cool stuff, you guys. This is exciting. These are life-changing things. They change our lives when we get these things and we take them into our being and we live from these truths. Our lives change in dramatic and positive and amazing ways. So I'm going to be your cheerleader up here today to get you going and motivated. Yes, okay. Now, we're only doing 2 parables today because this next one is going to take us a little time. This is the parable of the talents. And probably most of us have heard the parable of the talents. I'm going to just give it to you in a synopsis that the kingdom of heaven is like the master who's getting ready to travel, and he decides to give talents to 3 of his workers, of his servants. And a talent at that time was a significant amount of money, and he wants them to invest these talents. So he gives 5 talents to one, 3 talents to one, and 1 talent to one. So he goes away, comes back, he calls them back in, and the person with the 5 talents says, "Oh, master, I have doubled. And now I have 10 talents." And the one with actually it was 2 talents. With the 2 talents said, "Master, I have doubled it, and now I have 4. And so, he was so happy. You have done so well with investing these that I'm going to give you more to look over, to be, you've proven yourself. Well, then comes the one with the 1 talent. And this 1 talent guy is like, he's nervous, he's afraid, he's in fear, he's anxious, he worries, he doubts, and he comes and he's like, "Oh, master, I was so afraid I was going to lose this talent that I just buried it in the ground." Well, like the next paragraph, I'm not even going to read it because this master just was not kind to this 1 talent guy. And, was just really, putting him down. And essentially, he took the talent from the 1 talent person and gave it to the servant that had the 10 talents. And then he says, for to everyone who has, more will be given. Will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. Kind of seems like an unfair kind of thing, doesn't it? But it's not. And then he goes on to say, and this is why I say he was kind of mean to this guy, because he says, and cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Okay, remember, this is a teaching story, okay? So, what he says is, this is about consciousness and only consciousness. Mind is the only buying power in this world. Believe greatly, and you won't have the money, and you can buy greatly. Believe little, and you won't have the money to even buy a living. Mind, then, is currency. More particularly and precisely, it is the currency of the kingdom of heaven. It is psychic stuff. It buys all things, including health and happiness. Okay, so the 3 servants represents stages of consciousness for us. And we've all been in all 3 stages. And again, I've said it many times, we're going to vacillate. We're going to find ourselves in the 1 talent consciousness. And I'll give you an example of that. So the 1 talent consciousness, it is the consciousness that hesitates, it doubts, it fears, it lives in anxiety, it gets frustrated easily, it gets angry easily, and it doesn't really trust in its own value and worth, and because of that, the 1 talent consciousness doesn't believe that God is for them. And we've probably all been there at some point in our lives if we were raised in something other than this kind of teaching. This is a consciousness that doesn't really have any understanding of universal laws or principle or a relationship with that which we call God or love or source, whatever you want to call it. Instead of acting upon this world, the 1 talent consciousness allows the world to act upon it. And the authors say this consciousness recognizes only the outside world, feels no inner reality, no inner drive, and push to modify the outer world. This is the kind of consciousness, and see if you relate to it from maybe what you've said or you heard other people say, that says you can't do that. There's no cure for this illness. That's never been done this way before. And it's silly to even suggest to them that with and through God, all things are possible, because they don't have that in their consciousness. Yet, he says, they are endowed with the greatest force and capacity there is, which is the mind, the capacity to think, the 1 talent. And that is the most important talent that we have, is our ability to think. He said the 1 talent man has the 1 great treasure of life, but he doesn't realize that he has it. And, this gnawing and gnashing of teeth at the end, the reason that I kept that in there is because when you live from that consciousness, it's a painful way to live. You're not realizing that there is something here with you that is moving with you through life and is guiding you and supporting you, and that you're co-creating in that. And so I'm going to tell you that the 1 talent consciousness for me was when I was in that dogmatic fundamentalism. Because when I was in that dogmatic fundamentalism, I didn't believe that God was for me. I believed that God was separate from me, God was a man in the sky, and that, what happened, that God was directing my life, and that, whether or not I was going to get into heaven or have good things in my life really depended on how good of a person I was. And that was subjective, totally subjective, because you could go from one religion to another, and, you can't dance or you're going to go to hell. And it'd be in my religion, no, you can dance and it's all good, So it was, it was very, very, subjective in that. And for me, I believe that most of us are out of this one talent consciousness, or we wouldn't be sitting here today or listening online to something like this. And I want to say that we go back to that one talent consciousness. So I'm going to give you an example that is very personal to me. Do you, and I've shared this, but do you ever, when you're driving, get frustrated with the person in front of you that's not going even the speed limit or doesn't turn their blinker on? Anybody ever get, That's a one talent consciousness. I'm preaching to me here when I say this. This is my one of my areas of opportunity for growth, because this is the consciousness that says they are doing this to me, and that's why I'm feeling so frustrated. If they would just speed up, or if they would have just used their blinker, I wouldn't be feeling this way, right? Okay, can you relate? Even if it's not that thing, can you relate to some things in your life where you're putting it outside of yourself? So I want to tell you this. No, it's not them. It's not anything outside of us. But in that one talent consciousness, we do believe that it's them, that it's something outside of us that is causing that. So this is the opportunity for us just to look and ask ourselves, where am I in that one talent consciousness? And here's the thing too, well, no, I think I'm going to tell you that in a second. Okay, we're going to the two talent human. The two talent human doesn't know a lot about discipline, but they have strong impulses towards good. And I think this is kind of in the beginning stages when we start to understand these truths. We don't really totally get them, but man, we're on fire. We're gonna push and we're gonna manipulate life to go the way that we want life to go. This is the mind that knows the law intellectually, but mostly pursues outside gratification. So the way I'm going to explain this is that my first husband, when he was like 23, started working for this insurance company. And the book that they used to train the insurance salesman was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Fantastic book. I mean, this book is what really brought their universal laws to us in the beginning. But with this particular business, all of this that was taught in this book was used to encourage the salespeople to pump up their drive, to want to sell more, to want to be number one in the company, to want to be knighted at the round table, which was like a really big deal to be knighted at the round table. And that's all good and well. I'm not putting that down. The challenge was there wasn't a spiritual component to it. It was all about outward gratification. And when we have a spiritual component to it, that expands everything. Like the spirit, when I came into Unity and I got the spiritual component, life-changing to have that spiritual component. With the example, the two-talent consciousness of getting frustrated by drivers, I see this consciousness, and so I may be a two-talent, actually, rather than one talent, as one that recognizes and knows that the drivers are not the cause of my angst, but I still get frustrated and I still express my frustration verbally while I'm in the car. Because I know that they're not the cause, but by golly, I wish they would just go the speed limit. I still let myself, I know the truth, but I'm not necessarily living the truth that I know. And where is that possibly true in your own life? And a willingness to take a look at that. Where am I in that two-talent consciousness? And I really know that I can do better. That I can do better. And it's a journey, isn't it? This is the cool thing. I'm not beating myself up for this. So you can't beat me up either, as I won't receive it. But, it's just an example. Okay, and then the five-talent consciousness. Now, the five-talent consciousness, he relates this to the five senses, and that we all are like the five-talent servant. We have five senses: taste, touch, smell, sight, and sound. Yes, okay. And he says that some philosophies maintain that all of our knowledge comes from just those five senses. But he said that can't be true because we would have no hope. Because there are times in our lives when our five senses tell us that there's no hope, tell us that something is awful. But then what kicks in are these what he calls spiritual counterparts of senses. These senses inside of us that step up and say, and help us to see something differently, help us to understand something differently, help us to feel something differently. Have we all had these experiences? Yes, where like we know that with the five senses we can see, but with our inner insight, that's when we go, oh, I see. Oh, I understand. And so what he's saying about the 5 talent who then increased it is that that's our journey, is to increase to the 10 talents, is to not just stay in sense consciousness, but to recognize that we have these inner senses that will guide us in amazing ways if we allow them to. He says, the 5 inner senses lay hold of an inner world of significance and reality, and that all maturity leads to the development of the inner senses and perception. That is why the kingdom of heaven is like a man who was given 5 talents and doubled his money. The 5 senses cannot exist alone. They do not lay hold of truth. They need the spiritual senses to complement him. And that is what is meant by the 5 talent man doubling his money in the kingdom of heaven. It's a doubling of perception, of an inner perception. And it's an increase in our faith and knowing that we can experience the goodness of life. He goes on to say that circumstances suggest defeat, but the spiritual thinker remembers that circumstances are not causative. That mind is causative and so establishes hope and faith not upon an external view of things, but upon an internal knowing. He thus sustains a constructive consciousness. Going back to the example of the drivers on the street, this, my friends, is the consciousness that just is no longer bothered by it. This is the consciousness that you get in the car, people are going slow, and you trust it. And you go with the flow. I'm working on it. I'm going to get there. Our insight. Huh? You got to leave 5 minutes early. 5 minutes early. We were just literally in our vehicle for 15 hours on Friday. And whew, that was a long journey. There may have been a few times that we were like, oh, if this person would just speed up. It was a long journey. So 5 minutes early wouldn't have helped us that day. So I want to share another example, and I'm going to close with this example because it's a 3-minute video. But to me, this young man that you're going to see has the 10 talent consciousness because he absolutely did not allow his 5 physical senses to limit him to determine the quality and the direction of his life. So may this young man inspire all of us to bring forth that which is within us. His name is Zion Clark. He was on America's Got Talent. So I'm closing with this.